Hi, I'm Nimesh Shah, CEO of Blick Rothenberg. I'm here today with private client partner Neil Lancaster to talk about next month's budget. After 3 Prime Ministers and 4 Chancellors in 2022 and a rowback from the disastrous mini-budget, is Jeremy Hunt under pressure to cut taxes or increase taxes? So Neil, has Jeremy Hunt got anything to say in next month's budget?
Well, he says not. He's really lowered expectations in terms of what's going to happen on this budget. But let's take a step back and look where we are. On the one hand, we've got the highest tax burden we've ever had in this country. Equally, we've got national strikes in many of our core and main industries, from the NHS to train drivers. On the other hand, we've got 48 billion of additional tax receipts between April and December last year. And my sense as a private client partner is that figure is going to increase when we get the January figures in from this year as well. The other thing we've got to bear in mind is we've got an election provisionally slated for April 24. So everything that the Chancellor says now is going to be very, very carefully constructed with an election coming up.
Yeah, some staggering numbers there, Neil. The 48 billion surplus on the previous period from last year. Clearly, the government's tactics are working around increase of tax take to repay some of the COVID support that there was given in 2020-21, and the freezing of the allowances, which has had such a big stealth effect on people and families. Do you think there's anything that Jeremy Hunt might do around the pressure that he's getting from the cabinet, the government, around reducing taxes?
Yeah, we certainly may see that. My personal sense is that we're probably going to see some easing of certain things like the energy price cap, which is set to increase by 40% in April this year. That's a big cliff edge for many working class people in this country, and he may use some of that cash to ease that very significant burden as we approach that in April.
And it's interesting what you say about energy prices, because that has really dominated the last year and a half with soaring inflation. Clearly the Liz Truss package was super generous. There was a big rowback from that, and so domestic households are going to see an almost 40% increase in their energy prices from April. Also, there's fuel duty as well. Rishi Sunak was very generous and gave a 5p reduction in March last year. That's potentially going to increase by 12p in March as well. So with all that said, what can Jeremy Hunt and Rishi Sunak do to temper some of the energy burden, especially on businesses as well, because they've seen their support really rowed back, and it's much more targeted support?
Yeah, so the Chancellor's really got 2 options. He can either increase taxes further and try and gain additional tax take, or he can give away some of these additional taxable income that he's had over the last year, and which we'll get figures for shortly from January. Maybe he does both. The reality is he may well look to extend the levy on energy companies. Yeah. I think that's most likely. Otherwise, it leaves him very exposed to the opposition, who are very keen to extend and increase the levy. But we'll see. My sense is it'll probably be a bit of both.
Yeah, and talking about the opposition, you mentioned about the favour of windfall taxes from the Labour opposition. Labour have also talked about some other taxes that they would increase if they come into power in 24-25. Do you think the Conservatives will need to react to that now?
My sense is it's probably a little bit early for the Conservatives to place out their manifesto, given that they're in the incumbent government. But I think that Jeremy Hunt may use this budget as the premise to lay out his plan for growth, which was something which, when he gave his autumn statement, was a little bit lacking in content.
And there's been a big furore from certainly the Labour opposition for some time now that if they do come into power, then one of the first things they do is abolish the Nondom regime. Now, clearly this is something that the Conservative government don't want to do. They've kept their powder dry. But do you think they have to react on Nondoms now?
Yeah, it's certainly possible that they may try and outflank Labour by proposing some changes, albeit not an outright abolition now, just to head that off at the outset. We saw some changes to the non-dom regime in 2017. They've stayed relatively dormant since, but with the very significant pressure from the Labour Party, who have been talking about everything from significant change to outright abolition, it's certainly possible that they do outline some notional changes just to keep the Labour Party at bay and keep the electorate happy.
And from what you've said so far, Neil, It seems like a bit of a limbo budget, really. And I suppose, why are we having a budget right now? We've just had one, or we had a couple actually, the back end of last year. Has he really got anything to say in March?
I think we have to go back to the fact that he's got an election coming up in a year's time, and whilst it's probably too early to start giving away with election giveaways and tax cuts, at the same time it is a really useful opportunity for him to start laying out the Conservatives' plan for growth in the economy, for dealing with some of the really fundamental issues in the economy, and also highlight that tax receipts are up significantly as a result of some of his policies. So as we said before, we may see a little bit more of spending giveaways rather than tax increases or decreases.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's going to be a fairly low-key event, and it should be a low-key event, and I suppose Jeremy Hunt's whole demeanour has been fairly low-key, and it's also the Rishi Sunak influence as well over the last few months since Rishi Sunak's been Prime Minister. I can't see that there's going to be a huge amount of fanfare around this budget. I think they need to line themselves up, don't they, for maybe an big bonanza October statement, November statement, on where there could be some huge giveaways. If there was something that Jeremy Hunt could do, and let's talk about two things. One is, if there was a tax grab, what could he grab hold of? Is there much that he could grab hold of? And secondly, what could he do on the giveaway side as well?
Yeah, it's a good question. And, of the 20 years worth of budgets we've seen, there's been very few very quiet budgets over that period. One of the things we've been waiting to see for years now, or expecting to see, is the tax-free 25% allowance abolished on pensions. Whilst I don't expect to see it in April, in theory it could be something that is tabled for review. It's certainly something that over the next few years I expect to see some form of review of.
Yeah.
We've already mentioned the non-dom regime. We could see some tweaking of that by the Conservatives. It's certainly going to be something that comes under review by any party that forms the next government, and likely the Labour Party if they do.
Yeah, on the giveaway side, any tips on what Jeremy Hunt could give away?
On the giveaway, there's the potential to make some changes on fuel duty, as we mentioned. It's not necessarily a tax cut, but equally on the cliff edge that we're facing on energy prices in April, again, that potentially is a giveaway as well. But he's already done a lot around halving allowances for capital gains tax, and some of the other allowances in our tax system. He's reversed many of the policies, or if not all of the policies, that we saw with trusts and quasi. So I think it's more unlikely that we see significant tax giveaways now. As you say, I think he's probably going to wait until their manifesto is released, so that they don't have to do any U-turns in the coming months, and then wait until October for a big bonanza then.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And despite the huge amount of pressure on unfreezing of allowances, doing something about the child benefit charge, all those things that have been such a big anchor and burden on working families. I think you're right, Neil. I don't think that we're going to see too much in the way of giveaways at this budget, and it's probably a bit of a PR stunt. Thank you so much for taking us through that.
No problem.
I think it's going to be a quiet statement. I've been wrong before, but I hope I'm not wrong right now. Now is not the time for more and more dramatic change in the UK economy, and I think a period of stability is much needed. Thank you, Neil.
Thanks.